Cobra.
What's going on, everybody? I'm John J. II, and this is the Gin College Podcast. I'm here with our co-host, Cody Almasi. Cody, how are we doing today, bro?
I'm doing great, man. Just excited to be here with you, talking to the people.
I love it, man. I love it. So a lot of stuff happened in week one. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get into week two briefly. We want to touch on the major games. We want to talk about every major event that happened to the best of our ability. So we're going to do that for you guys here and now. So let's just kind of talk about college football week one. Obviously, a lot of stuff happened. There's no way we could possibly talk about it within the allotted time. But let's just kind of talk about the takeaways that we had. I want to ask you first, what were your major takeaways from week one, and what are you going to remember going forward throughout the season?
Like you said, it's going to be insanely hard to cover everything. It was a week one to remember. I don't really recall anything like that in a long time. I think after the pandemic, they really wanted to give us something special. The main takeaways are that the teams we thought were going to be really good for the most part are really good, or they had really good opponents. If they did struggle, like Clemson, I think that they'll be all right going forward. It's one loss against Georgia, maybe not a finals for them this year, but I think that they will still have a strong season. And some of the teams that had good seasons last year during COVID, kind of anomalies. Some are going to prove to be anomalies, like UNC, Iowa State, I think, is a little suspect, but we'll get into that later.
Yes, we will. So yeah, there's a lot of takeaways, obviously, from week one. Obviously, we'll talk about Kenneth Walker the third from Michigan State. I'll talk about that when we get into the Michigan State teams inside them and inside their camps, because that's going to be a big deal. We'll talk about that in their own segments. But yeah, let's talk about the Clemson Georgia game real quick. So JT Daniels pulled it off somehow. We talked about this a little bit before we went live, but the offenses on both sides of this game were really lacking, and I didn't really see a lot of firepower from either one. I guess you can call it a defensive game, whatever you really want to call it. It really happened. Low scoring game, under smashed, everything like that. So JT Daniels pulled it off for me, and I talked to Cody before the stream about help me out with this guy's name, DJ
Uyunglele.
Uyunglele. I'm going to get that before the end of the season. Trust me. And yeah. I'm glad I took a phonetics class in college, because this is going to help me out with all these tough names. So Uyunglele. He struggled on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously didn't convert a single touchdown the entire game. But the reason I made that pick, for everybody that caught that pick early on, is, I picked Georgia money line. They were +3 going into the game. I picked that pick because I saw the indecision from Uyunglele in an interview, talking about his offense, talking about how he felt about his defense, talking about how he felt about the entire camp coming out to succeed in their season opener. And I just didn't see that sincerity. I didn't see that, confidence in his own team to really bring it out and bring the win home for Clemson. So I based a lot of my pick off of that. And there's obviously redemption on both sides with JT Daniels and DJ Uyunglele. And I had to make my pick off of something, and that really clicked it for me. And it's tough to make those picks early on in the season, but you got to make those picks in the big games to come out strong, especially come out swinging in early on games. So we can kind of touch on that a little bit more, but I want to talk about the first couple games of the season. For most of these Power 5 teams, these top 25 teams, they're going to be playing some somewhat quote-unquote scrub teams, and that's just kind of how it is. That's kind of how the scheduling is. When you're considering the first couple games. Once we get into conference play, it'll be a lot easier for us to paint that picture and talk about how these major teams, these top 25 Power 5 teams, are going to fare amidst their own conferences, and then we can paint the entire landscape, whatever colors we want, based on what's happening in the college football landscape. So lots of crazy games, guys. The one major upset that I saw come out to me was UCLA, LSU. UCLA coming out with the dub, 38-27. Obviously, there's holes in the LSU offense, but we obviously didn't expect this to happen. Nobody, I think, could have called this from a mile away. What were your takeaways from that upset?
I think LSU, they just won that championship a couple years ago, and they got comfortable. Ed Orgeron, he was getting cocky, talking to some fans, some UCLA fans. They have a whole shirt made out of it, whole thing. So they're going to use that kind of swagger, and everybody – having them underrated is going to do a lot for them, I think, going forward, motivation-wise, and really surprising everybody over there in the Pac-12 and then the rest of the college football landscape.
Yeah. So I think that was a big part of it, and that's obviously good to get some merchandise out there based on something that means something. I remember the shirts came out, the Michigan State shirts of the guy holding his head like this after Jalen Watts-Jackson recovered that muff punt. Yeah. Back in the day, we don't have to rewrite history there. That's probably a black mark on your past.
Turned into all of our brains over here. Yeah.
As a Michigan fan, it's probably tough to remember. But regardless, it's great. I love the upsets. I wish there was more upsets to talk about, but that was one that really stuck out to me.
Virginia Tech was another one.
Yeah,
Virginia Tech. UNC was one of those teams everybody really high on early on. Even myself, Sam Howell, Heisman hopeful. Early draft pick for next year projected, and then lots of mock drafts. And he just really underperformed. He looked like he relied on his run game last year. That's what it was evident. But I think Virginia Tech, they're now ranked number 19, I believe. So they're getting some respect put on their name, as they say. It was in Langley Field, Virginia last week. So yeah, we're going to really look at that Virginia Tech defense going forward. ACC isn't known for their defense, but they looked good against UNC and what was supposed to be a high-flying offense.
Yeah, Braxton Burmeister, he really came out and he really did the job that he had to do to win that game. It was a home game for these guys, but listen, I don't care where it's at in the beginning of the season. A lot of these guys haven't played in front of big crowds before. Even, you got sophomore guys that are going to be upperclassmen soon. that haven't played in full stadium. So that's something that has to it's going to take a little bit of getting used to from no matter what team is playing. 1 touchdown, 1 interception, pass for 169 yards. So that's a good starting point, especially to win against a top 10 team, number 10 being UNC. To punch that game through and to win that game, that's a big statement early on in the season. That's going to give them confidence going into future games, especially going into further conference play. So I'm really excited to watch these Hokies.
Especially with Clemson losing that first game, it really the ACC is wide open now for any of these other teams that had any aspirations of getting to the championship, the ACC championship this year. All their chances just got a little bit higher. So I know teams like Florida State with a statement game, they lost in the end, but Mackenzie Milton, comeback player of the year, they really looked. That was a game to watch. I did a recap on it. Most of you probably watched it, but that teams like FSU and Virginia Tech are going to be looking forward to capitalize on Clemson's early struggles.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about that game a little bit. That could have been an easy upset too. It should have been upset, but things happen in OT, and when things get to OT, to even get to OT for Florida State in that game,
18 down. They were down 18.
Come on, that doesn't really happen against a Notre Dame team. It's just kind of unheard of to see that happen. To see that tenacity, especially you said Mackenzie Milton, comeback player of the year.
Who knows what would have happened if he would have been in early in the game, or just how quickly he started to turn things around and that offense rallied behind him. Who knows what would have happened if he would have been at the helm from opening rip.
Right, exactly. And just to see him come out with such confidence when he did come on the field, that was really a sight to see. And I was pulling for Florida State that entire game. And I remember we were both watching it. We were texting each other during that game. It was just wild. There's some crazy calls that happened. Cody had his recap video. So if you didn't get a chance to check that out, navigate to our YouTube channel through our link tree. I'll put that up on the screen for you guys. Go check that out right now. Really good stuff there. This game was a crazy game. This is probably the most exhilarating game of week 1. I can feel confident, and I can say that with a lot of confidence that was the case. That was the most exhilarating, most high intensity, high octane game contest that I saw in week 1. And that was one
especially
that I remember.
After Clemson and Georgia, I think we were really expecting an offensive show, and there were no offensive touchdowns in that game. So, and it didn't hurt that Sunday night's game was standalone. It was a Sunday night. We were kind of Saturday. There was so much football going on. So all day we got ready to watch Notre Dame. They have a huge fan base. So I think everybody really tuned in, and it was a treat. The Disney scriptwriters, they might make a movie Rudy-esque about that.
Oh man, they might. They might. That's a great point. I didn't even think about that. And Disney's always watching, guys. So whatever happens in real life, they're like, oh man, what can we make a movie on? That's like
Mackenzie Milton was 117 days removed from football. It was an artery damage, and he almost actually had to have his leg amputated. His surgeon, I think I mentioned it in my my recap video, but his surgeon was there because he wanted to see with his own eyes that he could.
Yeah, he's a big part of his comeback. If it wasn't for him, there had to be a very small amount of surgeons that would even attempt to make that kind of operation happen. So big shouts out to the surgeon to essentially saving his life as he knew it and his career as a football player. So a lot of big things at play there, but big game. Florida State, Notre Dame, lots of promise. Keep your eyes on this Florida State team. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be a big threat, and they're going to win a lot of games.
On the other side of things, Jack Cohn, first game for the Fighting Irish. He's a Wisconsin transfer, and dude looked good. 4 TDs, almost 400 yards. His 1 interception was just a launch down the field to try to stop it from going to OT, but I think the Irish are going to have a good season ahead of them as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Moving forward, though, we got Oklahoma, Tulane. Tulane really made that game interesting, only losing by 5. I see an asterisk by that on my notes here that I think Cody wrote down. Crazy stuff. Number 2 Oklahoma. I'm wearing the hoodie last week when we were doing the podcast, and it's just like I'm really hoping that this Oklahoma team's going to do good coming out number 2. They're looking good. But that was a little bit of a shaky start for these guys. I don't know, if
they were in Norman too. It was supposed to be at Tulane, but because of Hurricane Ida, they actually had to relocate to Norman. So it was a home game, but it was away a home game. So it was a kind of weird feel. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. Also, last year, Spencer Rattler, he did struggle in the early goes of the season. He got replaced by the backup Mordecai, but then, as we all know, he finished with a strong season that has him hyped up this year. So we're going to be watching that down the line.
Yeah, I'm gonna be definitely keeping my eye on Spencer Rattler. He's gonna have to hold the rope for this Oklahoma team if they want to succeed going forward. Throwing 2 interceptions against Tulane, that's not something you really want to hang your hat on. Against any team, really. Turnovers are terrible. That's the worst. Other than like a forced fumble, defensive scoop and score touchdown, the interception category is one of the worst things you can do as a quarterback. So you're going to want to avoid that, especially a top 2, top 5 team. You're going to want to avoid that at all costs. So we'll see how they fare, see if they make any adjustments going forward. Maybe got to make some line adjustments. Who knows what they're going to have to do, but keeping it that close against Tulane, that's obviously a scare for Oklahoma fans everywhere. Let's move on to the Big Ten now. We'll talk about all the non-MSU, non-Michigan games. First, we'll talk about Penn State at Wisconsin. Penn State squeezed the win away 16-10. That was a close game. That was a nail-biter, barn burner, whatever you want to call it. They squeezed the win away. That was
in
good
Wisconsin,
stuff.
And they had 96% capacity. I think that's just something to add because they get wild in Camp Randall there in Madison, Wisconsin. So Penn State to come in and just completely shut them down like that on their both defenses looked good, but Penn State obviously edged it out.
Yeah. So that was a good contest. That was a good back and forth. I like that. There's a lot of defensive stands going on, but obviously the offenses prevailed in that one. Then you got Ohio State, Minnesota. We talked about that one. That actually happened before our first podcast. Obviously a quick little scare for Ohio State early on. PJ Fleck coming out and really getting in the grill of the offense, getting in the grill of the defense going into halftime. That really made it a game, but they kind of fell off the rails without putting too much out there to, basically throw that game away. And they really let Ohio State and CJ Stroud come out and let the Ohio State offense really capitalize over their defense. They fell apart, maybe make some defensive changes or do some kind of structuring there, but there's no way to really anticipate how any of these teams are going to play coming out of the blocks. And it's hard to really base too much of the future stuff off of this first game. It's a trial game. You got to see how things are happening. It's going to be counted on your record.
I think that Ryan Day also at first, maybe he wasn't trying to show too much flashes of what that offense can do with their explosive receivers and CJ Stroud. I think they're going to be amazing this year. So I think he was trying to be a little conservative in the beginning, but Minnesota was scaring him. Mohamed Ibrahim, we lost him to injury for the rest of the season. That is very unfortunate, and I was looking forward to watching him all year, but injuries are a part of the game, and you just got to next man up, keep rolling with it. But Ohio State, the way they responded at halftime, I think Ryan Day said, the hell with it. We need to win this game and just let it rip. And they looked explosive from the third quarter on. And I think that just is something to think about.
Yeah, they figured it out for sure going into the second half, especially late. They really figured it out and got the ball moving on the offensive side and got the win. So we got to give them credit where credit's due. Number 4, Ohio State, obviously losing Justin Fields the NFL draft. CJ Stroud has a big, big task on his plate to be able to come through, deliver, and get the job done for the Buckeyes. So, I get sometimes in my own feels talk about the Buckeyes. Don't really feel too fondly about them. Like I said last week, I love Justin Fields, but I don't like talking very highly about Ohio State. But I got to be objective. This is a college football podcast. I got to be objective. Ohio State came out, got the job done. I got a lot of faith in CJ Stroud going forward, starting off with a win. So they're going to be a big threat in the Big Ten. Then we got Indiana, Iowa. Indiana just with a crazy performance over Iowa, stomped them 34-6.
No, Iowa won.
Iowa won that?
Yep. Iowa shut Indiana and the Hoosiers up big time.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong screen. Yeah, you're right. So,
yeah.
So Indiana.
I actually wrote that wrong on our script, so I will take full responsibility for that. Yeah, but Iowa, the Hawkeyes really defensively shut down Michael Penix and the Hoosiers, Tom Allen. The Indiana Hoosiers had a really good season last year, but it's not off to a good start. The Iowa Hawkeyes, they're never a team we talk about winning championships, but they're always right there, and they give every team on their way to the Big Ten championship a hard time. You always see them 9, 10, 8 wins. So,
yeah, they're a Big Ten-time team. They're always crushing, the 500 mark.
Smash mouth defense.
They're hard hitters. They're really hard hitters. And you got to watch out for them. They're eating a lot of corn over there. It is what it is. They're putting some in the water over there. I don't know what's going on, but they're a tough team to beat. I know just being a Michigan State fan, they're always a big threat for Michigan State, and it's always a nail biter.
you guys always having big matchups towards the end of the season, Iowa and Michigan State, and just running the ball against each other. Mike D'Antonio, I remember those kind of games and statement wins for Michigan State in their heyday.
Yeah, big time, big time. So I guess we can move on since we're talking about Michigan State and Michigan. We'll talk about the Michigan State Northwestern game, a little bit of a recap there. So obviously Kenneth Walker the third coming out, being making a statement, being a statement player early on. And that's what he was really brought on to do in the running back position, to be a strong-armed back, to be somebody that is not going to be put down easily. And he's just going to be, a downhill running back, and he's going to give it his all and do everything he has to. So
I know you were talking a lot about the quarterback who is going to come out of the starter and whatnot, but he really takes that pressure off because it doesn't matter who's throwing the ball if you got that dude toting it play after play and just getting 5 to 10 yards. Man, you guys are looking good in that aspect.
Yeah. And, I know we're going to do some Heisman watch stuff going forward here soon. But Kenneth Walker's on my Heisman watch. 23 carries, 264 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean,
as he should
season opener, that's incredible. And I'm really impressed with this kid. Peyton Thorne obviously got the job done. Not too many yards through the air, 185 yards and a passing touchdown. Went 15 for 25. So there's some room for improvement there. But I was impressed with his performance. I was impressed with him really taking control of the offense. Maybe even if most of it was on the ground and all the touchdowns were through Kenneth Walker, that means the linemen are doing their job too. And all credit goes to Mel Tucker at the end of the day, being at the helm in Michigan State. So really confident win from Michigan State and the Spartans out of that camp. So
especially again in a Big Ten opener like that against Northwestern, they always give you guys a tough time. So
yeah,
it must feel good to get that one under the belt and keep rolling.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. Let's talk about your Michigan Wolverines, though. What were your takeaways from game 1 against Western?
So I didn't get to lock in and watch the game from start to finish, but, I went back and watched the game in full detail on YouTube afterwards, and better than I expected. Don't want to drink the Kool-Aid or get too excited. It was Western Michigan, and they scored twice on us early before our defense could get settled in. But we were bringing in a new defensive coordinator. We got rid of Don Brown last year, as we should have. Nothing really to complain about besides Ronnie Bell getting hurt. He got injured. He's out for the season. He was returning a kick. And in my opinion, you just shouldn't have your senior, your leader, best wide receiver. I mean, I understand maybe in big games going forward, you need some explosive offense. But in a routine game like this, there's no reason for him to get injured like that. And now it makes you have to be careful with who else is returning it. Injuries can really derail a season quickly. So the quarterback situation, Cade McNamara, he looked good. He was controlling the offense, spreading it around. He didn't have to do too much. Ben Corum, the running back, really just shone through. I forget his yards from scrimmage, but it was 200 and I believe around 20. He had a couple scores. And I'm really excited to watch him going forward the rest of the season. Yeah, besides that, we're going to see what happens with Washington this week. Shouldn't be a problem, but they were ranked last week and they dropped to an FCS opponent. That was their first ever FBS win, so that's huge. And it really doesn't do anything but put more pressure on Jim Harbaugh and Michigan to really look good and dominate. Because if we don't, the haters are going to be out and they're going to be talking, and I can't blame them.
Very well said, Cody. And to lose to Montana, that's almost inexcusable for a team like Washington. I see they're 20th ranked. They're a top 10 team all day long, especially going back a couple years. They got a lot of wins under their plate. But to see Michigan in the position they're in, Jim Harbaugh somewhat being on the fence, I think he has a lot of control in that situation as far as where he's going to go going forward. But we're going to have to see what the higher ups really feel about him and see how he performs in the beginning of the season and then going into conference play. It's going to be a big determinant. But losing Ronnie Bell, your senior wide receiver, that's going to be a big deal. That's going to be, a target miss. Now you got to count on your depth as far as the wide receiver position is concerned. You got to make sure those players are there.
He gets really young after that. So he was a real veteran presence for the wide receiver room. And I'm curious who's going to step up and take the helm there.
Yeah, I'm counting on him. I'm not a Michigan fan by any stretch of it, but I'm counting on Ronnie Bell to, throw on a headset, be a mentor for these young guys, and really take them under your wing. This could be a great opportunity for him, and hopefully he recovers quickly.
Give him a chance to come back next year and have a better season than he could have even maybe this year. So
exactly, yeah, it could be. I mean, everything happens for a reason. I'm a big believer in that. So we'll just see what happens with that. But I think they'll be fine. Really dominant offensive performance against Western Michigan going into the latter half.
I just want to touch on J.J. McCarthy. He's our backup quarterback. He's a freshman, and he got some reps towards the end of the game. And I'm not a Cade McNamara hater, but J.J. McCarthy, he looked like the heir apparent. Dude was running all over the field, making crossbody throws, and everybody was excited in the big house watching him make plays and getting excited for our future going forward.
Yeah, they got a bright future. I think if, and people are talking about Jim Harbaugh and they're like, oh, I don't know, his days are numbered here in Michigan, whatever.
Where do you go if you leave Jim Harbaugh?
Where do you go? That's the question. And if he does leave, I think he'll leave on his own accord, depending on whatever season goes. I think he'll leave on a high note. Hopefully he does. Mark D'Antonio didn't do that. So it kind of leaves a little bit of a blemish on his entire legacy, no matter if you won a Rose Bowl or Cotton Bowl, whatever he won. It kind of, erases a little bit of that by leaving on such a low note and kind of leaving Mel Tucker with the scraps. But to see Jim Harbaugh, if he can do some good here this year and leave on a high note, if that's what he decides to do, then, I think this is a good year for him to do that. If not this year, then next year. Or he might just stay for another 10 years. Who knows? He might just stay forever until he retires.
That guy, to be honest. Yep.
He's unpredictable.
It's all speculation.
Yeah, it's all speculation. We don't know what's going to happen until it happens. So we just got to wait and see. Let's talk about a couple week 2 games. Is there any games that stick out to you as far as, big time matchups, top 25, Power 5 teams matching up that you want to talk about?
I do want to talk about number 10 Iowa and number 9 Iowa State. That's not a conference matchup, but it is an in-state matchup. They call it the Cy-Hawk battle. The Iowa State Cyclones and the Iowa Hawkeyes. And the Iowa State, they struggled last week. They were number 7, and they struggled mightily to, Northern Iowa, which, you don't hear about them in football at all. So I think they're a suspect team, and I think Iowa Hawkeyes are going to have another just shutdown performance and knock them off the top 10.
Yeah, to see Iowa State at number 9 and Iowa at 10, that's kind of crazy closeness as far as rankings
It's
go.
the first time that they're ever coming in ranked against one another too in the top 25.
That'll be a game to watch for sure. Those in-state matchups are always big, no matter how big the school
is a running back for the Cyclones, and he's a great running back. So keep your eye on him.
Yes, sir. Then obviously, Washington, Michigan, just talk about that briefly. That's going to be a big one going forward. Hopefully Michigan can squeeze out the dub there. Michigan State's got Youngstown State, so that should be an easy dub. But obviously, just looking at the past, I was talking to you earlier about the Middle Tennessee, Michigan, whatever you want to call it, snafu. These things happen. These things
Appalachian
happen. Appalachian State. That's what I'm thinking. Middle Tennessee thinks it's a basketball game, right?
Yep. That's Michigan State.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, geez. Oh, Pete. I'm getting all mixed up here. But, so Appalachian State, there's a bit of a snafu there. And that just goes to show that these things happen, right? These lower teams, these lower tier teams, they can win against big time teams, big time ranked.
Tulane
teams.
Almost did.
Tulane almost did. It almost happened early on. So
Montana,
Montana too. So to a similar extent, these things happen, and you can't really count out Youngstown State, no matter how much of a lock it seems to be. So you got to watch out for these things, and hopefully they can stick to their core principles in carrying that game out. Then you got Oregon, Ohio State. That's going to be a big game too. I'm excited to watch that one.
Oregon struggled against Fresno State. I just think Fresno State's better than everybody realizes, so I don't want to take too much away from the Ducks. I am going to pick the Buckeyes personally. The Buckeyes have taught me all my life not to pick against them, so that's just how I'm rolling.
Especially as a Michigan fan, it's got to be a tough pill to swallow that, especially as of late, it's tough to take
it's been like 15, 16 years. So.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially to see how big of a rivalry that is and to see the teams that have came out of Michigan, within the last 10 years to not see a single win for that long is kind of crazy. And
especially as the margins have getting wider as of late. So it's a little concerning.
Definitely. And then let me see if I got any more big games here on my docket. As far as top 25 teams go, a lot of teams, and this kind of goes back to my original point, a lot of these teams are playing, and I hate saying bullshit teams, but they're playing lower tier, sub Power 5, teams. And that's just kind of how it is early on in the season. They're testing these teams out that maybe are not ranked or very low ranked against teams that are major league, that are top 25, just to kind of test their might and to see if they can, give themselves a test. Sometimes you see them win. So that's just kind of giving a little bit. And I think they do that. I'll be honest with you. I think they do that for the bookies' sake down in Vegas, because that kind of allows them to gauge, how is this team going to fare against this team? How is Alabama State going to fare against Auburn? For example, there's tons of examples here. Toledo, Notre Dame, UAB against Georgia, Texas A&M against Colorado.
I think it gives some of the bigger names, their offenses, a chance to get in stride, and they're almost like preseason games, just like for the NFL. On the other side of things, it gives these small schools a chance to, if they do somehow get that statement win, it puts them on the map. As you can see, Appalachian State, their brand has really grown since they beat my Wolverines in whatever year it was, 2007, 2008. Yeah, so it gives those schools a chance to, like I said last week, get a piece of the pie and really just start bringing more people, more students, more recruits to their school. And that's going to be big moving forward when we expand the playoffs.
Exactly. Yeah. So, there's really, at the end of the day, there's not too much to talk about when you're talking about these games, that they're not really, really good matchups. Because what are you going to say? What are we going to say? Oh, it's going to be a long shot. Mercer's just going to come out and drag Alabama. It's going to be a completely bloodbath, opposite side of the ball. Unranked.
We're just really looking for like Bryce Young to hit his numbers. Let's see what DJ Uyunglele does. Let's see what JT Daniels. Let's see if they can tune up against these teams and get their offense is in rhythm and get flowing for the rest of the season.
Exactly. It's a great trial period for these teams to really see what they're capable of, on both sides of the ball. You want to see how Mercer is going to play against a team like Alabama. That's why a lot of these teams, for the bettors, they're a little bit pissed off because they're not even seeing odds. They're not even given the opportunity for a team like Mercer to have the opportunity to cover, plus 56 or whatever.
Right.
You see those crazy lines here early on.
A chance to cover. Exactly.
Right. And it's just kind of one of those things that it's somewhat of a drought week. I hate calling it that, in college football mentality and whatever. But I want to make that a point that these early games, they're basically testing both sides. How dominant is Alabama going to be against Mercer? How much is Mercer going to be able to stand up to Alabama and their offense? They're going to be able to make, goal line stands, hold them to a field goal in the red zone, things like that. Those are going to have to be the things that you're looking for in these types of matchups, because they're all over. They're splattered all over the schedule for this weekend. So it's just kind of one of those things this week.
Definitely.
And I'm looking forward to conference play. Hopefully that's coming soon. I know it is, because I know the schedules of every single team, they're accessible to everybody. We have the internet, guys. So it's the 21st century. Okay. So I'm excited for conference play. Like I said earlier, that's going to paint the picture of the entire NCAA football landscape going forward into, the middle of the season, into the latter half of the season, and then going into hopefully the 12-team playoff, which we're all anticipating. It's growing. I love it. Obviously, it's more games. I understand there are more games that are going to have to be played for this to happen. But it's going to really increase the chances of these lower-tiered teams. I'm talking the Tulanes. I'm talking the UCLAs. I'm talking, really lower-tier teams, like probably not Mercer. I've said Mercer probably too many times on this.
But Appalachian State.
Appalachian State.
Duke, you got Kansas. Iowa State, they're ranked right now, but usually they're not up there. Cincinnati, they're not a Power 5 team, so they don't get a lot of respect. We haven't talked about them yet, but their quarterback, Desmond Ridder, is a beast and has NFL aspirations, and they're ranked in the top 10. So,
yeah, exactly. So you got to keep an eye on these teams. Like you said earlier too, doesn't matter if they're ranked right now. They're probably not going to be, in a couple weeks when they start playing some high-level teams, or even when they start playing, if it's a bullshit team, they're going to start playing one of these big-time teams and really get blown out of the water. So You got to be watchful for that. And a lot more variables are coming into play when considering the teams for the top 12. So that's going to make them work harder, but it's also going to give them a better chance of making a top 12 spot compared to a top 4 spot, which is mostly determined by a board of directors anyways, with them playing favorites and things of that nature. So it kind of can blur the lines a little bit of who's actually good, who's actually who's actually deserving of being in that position compared to what they want to paint the picture as. So
yeah, when they select at the end of the year, a lot of times it comes down to strength of schedule and resumes and speculation by analysts and experts at the top who are far removed from actual teams and the situations they have to deal with. So it can be a little frustrating from some of those lower fan bases and players.
100%.
Because I know those players want to play more games for those lower teams, because one more game is another chance to prove yourself to get a job in the NFL or so on and so forth. So
exactly, yeah, and you can see a lot of great athletes come out of these lower tiered schools that turn out to be great. So it's definitely gonna be a testament to their will to succeed and their will to win. And I'm excited to see that. And it kind of brings into the picture, and I always say this, March Madness-esque. I said that last week. I made that word. I'm going to copyright it and put it on shirts all the time. But I want to see that happen because that's where you see the Chicago Loyolas come out and make statements.
Exactly.
That's where you see the Gonzaga
used to be a team that was just Cinderella, but they've done that consistently for decades, and now they're there every year and are recruiting some of the best kids in the country, and they have players like Jalen Suggs. So
yeah, that's a perfect example because they were a team that was not even considered a long time ago. I'm talking before 2000, those days. But even nowadays, you don't even know that Gonzaga has a football team. I don't even know if they do.
I don't believe that they do. I don't think they do.
So to see them come out and perform like that and really make a name for themselves, it did take a couple decades for them to do that.
They had to find the right guy and their head coach to stick there and not take an NBA job or just a big college, accepting an offer from them because he wanted to build that. And now he's going to probably go down as the best coach ever and has a legacy that is unlike any other.
Yep, and that's what it's all about, is really forming that legacy and, building something from the ground up. Gonzaga is a perfect example of that. And they're going to continue to succeed as a basketball school for a long time because of what they've done and because of the push-ups they put in the trying years. So that's a really big aspect to take away. And that can happen in any college, in any sport, to really make a name for yourself and build a program from nothing to the ground, from the ground up. So really exciting stuff.
What's his name? Lou Fickle, real quick, at Cincinnati. He could have gone to MSU, but he's stuck at Cincinnati. Nothing against the Spartans, but I just appreciate when people stick with that team and really build something and don't just bail to the next place. Because a lot of times it doesn't work out the way they plan to, and they're gone on to somewhere else anyway.
And that had to be a hard decision to make. Do I stick with my roots or do I go to a team like the Spartans where I probably have a better chance of getting drafted? But do I stick this out and trust the process?
Yep.
And for him to do that, that's respectable. That's admirable. And I hope and wish more players and more athletes would decide to do that, because that really says a lot about themselves and their character.
Definitely.
So good stuff. Well, that brings us to the end, guys. Cody, do you have anything left to say to the beautiful people out there listening to us?
Everybody just be safe this weekend. Enjoy football like I'm going to. Go Blue. Go Lions, baby. I'll be at the game. Watch for me on the big screen.
Oh, baby. We're looking out for Cody on the big Jumbotron.
Our GM, Seth, will be there too.
Oh, yeah. He told me about that. He told me he's going to be going there. He's going to be sending me videos all day of them just having a great time. And I'm excited to watch those. But yeah, guys, just stay tuned for all of our posts, all of our Instagram posts. Follow us on Instagram. I put that in the description below, at Gin College on Instagram. Cody's at Gin College Analytics on Instagram, and Gin at Gin Analytics on Twitter. So make sure to follow those. I'm actually, I'm at Gin Commish. If you guys didn't know that already, I should put that as my name instead of John J, so you guys can know that and follow me on there. But yeah, look out for a lot more posts and a lot more shows and updates coming from us going into the college football season. We're very excited. It's still very early, and there's going to be a lot of crazy things that happen between now and the end. So really excited, guys. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you again for tuning in to the official Gin College podcast. I'm your host, as always, John J. II. Have a great night.